Let's talk about Cringe Lord Supreme, Actual Juice Warrior. So Actual Juice Warrior, AJW, is a YouTuber. Some people may know of him, some people don't. If you do, if you're a Vouch video viewer, you may have remembered the last time that his name ever meant anything, which is when he talked to Vosh about like criminal justice and everything. And instead of like actually talking about real issues in criminal justice, he basically just said everything is the fault of like common law, like British common law. It's just really kind of dumb. Oh, and then we got like a great clip of him getting blown out, which spurred a lot of people to look into racial disparities in criminal justice system, which is great. Isn't he shit? Yeah. He's like, poor, like food deserts don't really exist. Poor people just need to work harder. And now he's out with a new banger. Okay, and I always mix this guy with, what's the other guy's name? That like bald freak who looks like a fucking like the cue ball boy. He did like he's like his fursona is a kangaroo. He's a sexpat who went to Brazil to try to score some like Latin booty. Not Anthony Fantano. No, not Tim Pool. No, not Tim Pool. Not Bad Empanada. Even though he's not bald, but he is still a freak. Yeah, AIU. I always mix AJW and AIU together. Always, every single time. I don't know why it's so weird. I don't know. They're like the same. They're the same cringe to me in my head. Anyways, this man decided to put out a video. All right, unfortunate. I know. I didn't really care until I decided to watch a little bit of it. I was just like, it may be interesting. Let's see what he has to say, because I love listening to the opposing side speak. And honestly, it was bad, but it actually is worse than I expected. And I don't have very high standards or very high expectations of these people, but boy, was this bad. He's now saying that we need to put more people in jail, maybe even everyone in jail. We need to lower the requirements that it takes to go to jail and put people in jail for longer amounts of time. Just keep increasing it, maybe even like petty theft is like the death sentence or something. He said it acts as a deterrent. He says we need to do more, throw more people in jail all of the time. We need to do stronger broken windows policing. So it's not, now it's not even broken windows. Maybe it'll be like chewed gum on the sidewalk policing, and then you'll go to jail for that type of shit. Jail good, actually. Prison good, actually. And so he was like, this is Pog. This is what we need to do to make crime go down again, because the radical left care about things like rehabilitation, lowering recidivism, working to better the community, and trying to put people back into the community, cringe stuff like that. So he made a whole video about why the left is wrong about prisons and why we need to be putting as many human beings as physically possible and as many jails as possible. Let's see what the man, the myth, the legend has to say about prisons.
A myth is something that is widely believed to be true despite the fact that it's false. And a lot of times myth making is pretty simple. You just repeat something over and over and over again, and then people will believe it to be so. And one of the most...
I love it. I don't know, dude. This is a lot coming from someone who's like more on like the right side of the aisle when like Donald Trump exists,
Pernicious myths that we encounter when talking about criminal justice related topic is this myth that mass incarceration just doesn't work. Mass incarceration, there's no benefits to that policy at all. Mass incarceration, it's terrible in every way. And every time you debate a lefty on criminal justice...
Yo, what the fuck? I just noticed this. What is this editing? Who edited this video? Why do you I've never seen that before. You emphasize words with sepia tone.
Related stuff, or somebody who's just not informed, this is what you end up hearing about. We have too many people in prison. There's no justification for it. Look at the recidivism rate. It's absolutely terrible. But I'm going to be busting that myth today. I'm going to be debunking, disputing, refuting, and destroying it, because I didn't think of another synonym, so that one didn't even rhyme. But whatever, doesn't matter. But before we get into that, I have a wonderful...
No, we're going to stop him here because he's going to go into an ad read and he can eat my ass. So one thing, okay? Those things are true. Is his face smaller than Charlie Kirk? I think, and like, this isn't bullying, okay? This is just like my interpretation. I don't think his face is getting smaller. I just think his forehead is getting bigger because, he's getting older. Male pattern baldness is it just be that way, So I think that's what makes his face look smaller. It's just because he just has more forehead. I remember this guy. I saw him in real life. He's weird. He was like, yeah, I remember him. He was staring at Merrick's tit while when we were in Dallas, when we went to that convention, the political convention in Dallas. Yeah, he was like popping the look. Well, that's what Merrick said, at least. Okay, I was busy taking some pictures. Yeah, this is that guy. Yeah, he was debating with James Lindsay against like Destiny and LSP, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so he was that guy. I remember because I was sitting with Merrick and SDL for most of the night, and she was like, he keeps looking at my tit. But yeah, that's what I know about AJW basically at the moment. And all of those things are true. Like recidivism is bad because of the way we handle prisons. We don't care about rehabilitative justice or trying to put people back into their community. We do jail too many people. We do over police. All of those things are factually true and accurate. The only thing is that he doesn't care about that. What he cares about is trying to punish people. This is like centered to a lot of like conservative thought, which is just punishment. That's what they like. That's what they really care about. And it doesn't matter what information that you give them. They believe people need to be punished. They should be punished, and they should be punished harder. You should not be giving people incentives to do good things. There's only disincentives for doing bad things. And so that's why they always look to this and as the criminal justice system. And that's why they always like propose, make crimes harsher, give them more police, throw more people in jail. And then other people like him and other people like Harold, that we have 25% of the world's prison population, while having 3% of the world's population is actually a good thing. We'll get into that.
Topics in the news media today, and that ideology is called penal welfarism. It's topics in the news, and it is behind friend is taking this from me. There is an ideology that is afoot, and it is behind most of what we're hearing about criminal justice related topics in the news media today, and that ideology is called penal welfarism. It's basically that the criminal justice system should serve as some kind of welfare intervention tool to address the underlying causes of crime. Now, we've talked about multiple
This is kind of a good thing. This is pretty sick. AJW doesn't believe in this, mostly because he's stupid. This is stupid. I did a debunk video of this like a long while ago. If you're watching this in a YouTube video, it should be up here. And if you're watching on stream, trust me, bro. So basically what AJW believes is that poverty doesn't lead to crime, crime leads to poverty. So what happens is that people commit crime as they start committing crime as a funny meme. They like wake up and they're like, bro, wouldn't it be so cool to like start a drug ring today? And they go, man, that'd be so cool. And so they just start drug rings and then get into gang violence and crime. And that's what creates the poverty, and not them being in a poor situation and then they turn to things like crime to make some money. No, it's just it happens the other way around. That first the crime is a funny meme, or they're just too stupid, or they're like predisposed to just doing crime. And these communities that they just all they can do is commit crime. They make so many poor decisions, and now we have poverty. It's really dumb, and it's been debunked like several times. This just isn't true. This just isn't true. Poverty is one of the biggest predictors of crime, not because crime causes poverty, but because poverty causes crime. Why the fuck would people like rich people be like stealing cars? What need do they have for that? I don't know, besides it being fun, I guess, which I guess can happen, but not on a large scale that we see with like a downtrodden poor communities. It just doesn't work that way. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But this is really good. So basically what this is, penal welfarism, which is what they want to call it, to try and make it seem like a dirty word. What it basically is are schools and churches and job training programs and the possibility to get like a college degree, anger management classes and things along those, psychiatric help. That's what he's talking about when he says penal welfarism. So when someone goes to jail, what he wants is, I don't know, them to be like hung by their feet, and the guards to smack them with poles like they're pinatas for their entire prison sentence, instead of doing things like helping them get an education, helping them reincorporate themselves back into the community that they'll be released into, because most people aren't in jail for like their entire life, right? They will be let out at some point in time, right? So he wants to make it like a dirty word because he wants to try and pretend like it's some sort of like evil, terrible thing that we do, which is like helping criminals like get education.
Different times on this channel, how what the left posits as underlying causes for crime don't appear to actually correlate with criminality. And in fact, we have clear instances where the three
remember that he keeps saying correlate
underlying causes that the left clings to the most, that being poverty, income inequality, and racism, have been reducing, and yet crime has gone up seemingly independent of that. However, just like,
you know what's really freaking crazy? Listen, okay, racism declining, poverty, it's so declining right now, bestie. Listen, we passed the Civil Rights Act. Racism is basically no more in the criminal justice system, bro. It just basically doesn't exist. Even though like blind jury studies have proven that people see darker skinned people as more threatening and deserving of more punishment. And so even if they have the same exact priors, and this has been done by like even the US government. This has been redone by the US government, okay? And this is what's recommended by the US government. We'll be pulling up some stuff from the US government as well on like studies regarding crime, criminality, prisons, and all this type of stuff. Don't be surprised if he puts up a response video. I don't care if he puts up a response video. He's fucking stupid. I don't care. Thanks for the free clout, dumbass. I'm just correct and he's stupid. That's the way the world works. I'm right and he's stupid. Sorry. Every right winger is cringe except for me, and I'm always right. That's just like how the world works. It's like you jump from a building, gravity's gonna pull you to the ground. Okay, you pour water on something, it's gonna get wet. These are just the facts of the universe. I'm right, he's stupid. So he can make a response video if he wants. He'll just be more stupid. Thanks for the free clout, dumbass. So yeah, we should be helping people who are in jail to address, once again, yeah, those underlying causes that cause people to go to jail. Now, once again, he believes that people start to commit crimes because it's like funny or something, or they're just too stupid to not commit crimes. And so that's why crime in neighborhoods happen and not the other way around.
Like mass incarceration being this terrible policy that absolutely didn't work, they've repeated this myth enough times for it to be true. Now, I've told you multiple different times that root causes aren't any more important than any other type of cause. And if poverty actually drives you to commit crimes, then the solution to that is not to treat poverty as a mitigating factor. It's to treat poverty as an aggravating factor, because if you have something that makes you more prone to criminality, you need stronger deterrence, not weaker deterrence, against that criminality. Now, because the left is
root causes don't matter because like other causes happen too. Don't you think like the root cause, if we got rid of the root cause, like we'd still have crime, but like the main thing that drives crime, which would be gone, would mean there'd be a reduction in crime? Don't you think that'd be like a good thing? He just hates poor people. He does hate poor people. That's true. And he'll get mad when people say that, but it is just like factually true. He just doesn't like them. Aggravating factor. Yeah. Well, I want to play like a little bit more of this, okay? And then we'll hop into some interesting memes. Let me tell you, because this goes on a wild ride.
Arguing from a weak position when it comes to criminal justice, something not supported by fact, and they can't support their arguments by the data. They need to argue against tactics that actually work, that go against their ideology, by undercutting them based on false premises that they lay out. They assert their values in place of what these programs are actually intended to do, and then judge them by those metrics and deem them to be failure. And you see this all the time. Lefties claiming to be experts about...
Okay, so if you didn't catch that, basically what he's saying, lefties look at a problem in society, have like an end goal of what society ought to look like, and then if the society does not look like what they believe it ought to look like, they say something's wrong. That's what he just said. Everyone does this. It's called having politics. The left constantly does this, where they look at something and go, it's not working right, it's not working correctly, and it's not doing the thing that it should. Little do they know, it's supposed to be doing bad. Okay, yeah. Little you know, it's supposed to be hurting the community. Okay.
Prisons or criminal justice system when they don't know the first thing about crime or how to prevent it or how crime dropped in the United States post the 1990s. I'll give you a hint. Mass incarceration was a big part of it.
It seems like overwhelmingly.
And there it is. Mass incarceration dropped crime, throwing everyone in jail, ripping out the roots of communities. That reduced, it made everything better, broski. And the world has gotten better now that we have 25% of the world's prison population.
Our prison system is taking
source,
especially if we're talking low, mid, or low.
I don't want to spoil anything, but
low, medium, and like prison camps and stuff like that. Even on
you just want it to be like more rehabilitative.
We're talking, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like
I don't want to go like
on a general level. We are taking in like petty criminals and pumping out much.
Yeah, what you were saying. I got it.
Now that clip from
true, going to prison makes people worse, and they commit crime again. True and based. Nice work, Zan. I'm proud of you.
My debate, which I did live at DebateCon, the first ever live event in person hosted by the Modern Day Debates channel, is exactly a perfect example of what I'm talking about. In that clip, Xander Hall talks about how prisons are just making criminals worse. It's not rehabilitating them. Even though he didn't really say the word rehabilitation, that is what can be inferred from what he's saying. It's making them into super criminals. And by that metric, the metric of rehabilitation, prisons do not work. But here's the thing. Saying that prisons don't work because they don't rehabilitate criminals is like saying that a car doesn't work because it can't take you across the Atlantic Ocean. That's not really what prisons are intended to do.
I think the people who are criticizing our prison system, I think we all understand the criminal justice system that we have is not meant to make people better. It's not meant to help the community. It's not meant to help people who are committing crimes not commit crime again. That's not what it does. Because of people like AJW and the people who he like ascribes to, that he wants to like build off of here, because don't worry, we'll talk about it. They don't want people to become better. They don't want for people to become productive, useful, kind, and loving members of their society. They don't want people to stop committing crime. They don't want people to not want to be in gangs anymore. What they want to do, their main goal is to punish. That's what their main goal is. That's what they want. And everything else other than that is just is secondary. It is like a form of sadism. What they want is they want to see people hurt. They want to see people in pain. And once they see people in pain, they think that things are like getting better because the people who are experiencing pain deserve it. That's what their goal is. I think we all understand that our criminal justice system is not meant to make people better. That's why he said That's why Zan said when people come out of prison, they don't come out better. We know that because of people like you who try to make prisons worse. Somehow try to make American prisons worse. Wild stuff. So yeah, we just value different things. I care about people becoming better. I care about people being productive members of society. I care about people not killing people or like committing other crimes and not even having like the want to do those types of things. That's what I care about. AJW doesn't care about that. That's not his main thing that he cares about. His number one goal is to see people suffer. That's what it is. He doesn't care about rehabilitation. He doesn't even want to give it a try. He just wants to see them suffer. And he thinks the more they suffer, the better the world is. It's really weird, freaky, cringy stuff. We'll get into it. Don't worry. Yeah, we'll get into it.
And one of the architects and the biggest supporters of mass incarceration and the ideology behind mass incarceration is somebody named James Q. Wilson, somebody who, by the way, should be credited with saving more lives related to his criminal justice related ideals than any other person, any other thinker in American history. Because
this meme is very real.
Wilson. You guys may not have heard of this person before. He was very prolific in the 1950s, 50s and 60s, if I remember correctly, the years of his work. And he is the architect of the idea of mass incarceration. He is the architect of actually broken windows policing. And his colleagues make the theory and popularize it, the theory of broken windows policing, which if you haven't heard of, or you don't know necessarily what that means, broken windows policing is the doctrine that if you send police into a community and you see someone doing like really petty crime, you know, like littering, throwing a rock at like an abandoned building's window, stuff like that. Like, you know, being drunk in public, peeing in an alley. When you see that type of stuff, what we need to do, this is how the doctrine goes, is throw people in jail and throw them in jail for longer amounts of time and make their prison sentences harsher, make their punishment harsher, and try to police strongly the very smallest infractions that a human can do in a community. And once you do that, you'll make the community better because the small crimes equal big crimes later. It's actually kind of insanity. It is kind of insanity, right? So Wilson should not be credited with saving the most amount of lives or something. Wilson should be credited ruining the country. Like I'm just gonna be completely honest with you. Destroying poor communities and obliterating the countries. And just obliterating the country. And also like the incarceration system that we have now, how many like non-violent offenders that we have like sitting in jail for like long amounts of time. He is the architect of ripping America apart at the most molecular level, at its like at the community and at its family. That's what he is. That is what he is known for. That is what he did. That is what his work spurred on. Okay, he's just a bad human being. Anyways, was an American academic, political science, and authority in public administration. Most of his career was spent at UCLA and Harvard. More when Harvard sends her people, she isn't sending her best. He's the chairman of the Council of Academic Advisors for the American Enterprise Institution and other things, and the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board from 1985 to 1990, and the President's Council for other memes. His political views, although as a young professor, he voted for Kennedy and Johnson and Herbert Humphrey when he worked for their last political campaigns. Wilson later recognized as a leading conservative scholar, as indicated by his advisory position at the American Enterprise. He was a staunch advocate for the preservation of the war on drugs. So not only is he like one of the leading figures, one of the engines behind what led to the mass incarceration system, and the like overly harsh penal system that we have now in the country. He's also the architect of the war on drugs, like throwing people in jail for having drugs, and when they do drugs, throw them in jail for even longer. Just throw everyone in jail. Put them all in jail, and that's going to make the community better. This is his ideology. This is the guy that AJW is using to prove that this is like a good path to take. What he just quoted here, what he quoted like earlier, the page that he brought up and the page that he's going to show in a moment are all writings from Wilson. And the thing is, you know what's going to be really interesting? He's not going to pull up a single study here. Studies don't matter to him. What he's just going to say is this guy once in the 1970s wrote that we should throw everyone in jail, and I think that's a good idea too. That's basically what he said. Even now, when the dangers of drug use are well understood, many educated people still discuss the drug problem in almost every way except the right way. They talk about the costs of drug use and the socioeconomic factors that shape their use. They rarely speak plainly. Drug use is wrong because it's immoral, and it is immoral because it enslaves the mind and destroys the soul. This is the guy that he's quoting. Drug use is immoral because it destroys the soul. What the fuck am I reading? What the hell is happening? Thank you so much for being our soul leader. I really appreciate that. Really cool. Oh yeah, also really crazy. He also advocated for political machine. He argued that that politicians' parties, political parties, and political machines and formal power structures were essential to the functioning of the government and its formal power structures. Okay, this is something from a while ago, all right? A political machine. You may, if you took like American history or anything like it, you would have heard of a political machine. Basically, it's kind of like the American version, like, you know, homegrown American version of like the mafia. Basically, what happens is there's a city boss, and the city boss has like a bunch of underlings, okay, that helps do work. And the city boss basically picks out a politician, whether that be a senator, whether that be a city council member, whether it be something along those lines. He handpicks them because he knows he's going to do his bidding, do his work, give him preferable treatment. And he posts them up. What he does is he sends money out. He has his people campaign for them. He like helps control like other small businesses and get them put in. They help take people to the polls, okay? And he gives them their campaign a lot of money to make sure that they win. After they win, the politician then works in the city boss's favor. He does favors for him. They do good things for him. They also what they did is they paid off the police. So when they committed crimes, they didn't go to jail. One of the big things that political machines did to make a lot of their money was fraud. Like literal, actual, unironic fraud. So what they did basically is that they got together with like construction companies, or construction companies would be under their thumb as well. And they would have the construction companies work with the city. And so they owned the construction company and they owned the city or like the people running the city. And so they told the city to give the work to the construction people. And you would think, oh, they're helping them build roads. They're helping them build bridges. They're helping fixing infrastructure. And on a surface level, they are. But under the surface, what they're doing is overcharging the government, overcharging the city, and scraping the money off the top and pocketing it so they can use it again to gain more political power in other parts, to buy off more police officers, to buy off more politicians. That's what their goal was. And one of the biggest examples of this was a political machine in New York back in the 1900s that had a building in New York be put up for $4 billion in today's money. $4 billion for a single building to be put up. And this is not like a massive skyscraper or anything, okay? $4 billion. And that's when it started to get a little too egregious. That's when it started to become a little bit too much. And people started to crack down, and that led political machines in of themselves is what helped lead to a lot of restrictions on like politicians and money and things along those lines. Tammany Hall. There we go. Tammany Hall, good memes from back then. So this is the guy that we're supposed to trust on socioeconomic and political happenings in the US. Do you trust him? Do you trust him? What do you think? Just, we can just think for a little bit. Just think for a little bit. Is this your champion? So back to AJW.
For the most part, the prevailing ideology that led to the crime spike was the very same ideology that we're seeing today that is also leading to the crime spike. The idea that criminals are victims, the idea that the real problem is poverty, and if we just spend enough money on welfare programs, we will arrest poverty as soon as we get a description, as soon as we find out what it's wearing, and thus crime will cease or reduce, and nothing related to punishment or anything like that works at all. What I'm going to say is going to be...
It's kind of weird. Well, let's find out what poverty is wearing. We don't have to find out what poverty is wearing. What about jobs programs? What about investing in communities? Don't you think that's like a good thing to do? That's been shown to reduce poverty. Don't you think that's really great? Welfare programs? That's true. And those programs lifted millions of Americans out of poverty. Millions of Americans out of poverty. He'll say that poverty's been dropping. Why has poverty been dropping? Because of those welfare programs that have helped people not wallow in poverty. All right. Oh, also speaking of Wilson, this is his article that he wrote with one of his people that he worked with back in 1982 that was published in The Atlantic. So this is an actual article that was written by him and someone that he was working with, and I highlighted a couple of things to read. We suggest that unintended behaviors also lead to the breakdown of community controls. A stable neighborhood of families who care for their homes, mind each other's children, and confidently frown upon unwanted intruders. Unwanted intruders. I wonder what unwanted intruders kind of meant back in the 1980s and 70s. Huh. I wonder what that could mean. Can change in a few years or even a few months to an inhospitable or frightening jungle. Small crimes can turn a community into an inhospitable, frightening jungle, apparently. A piece of property is abandoned, weeds grow up, a window is smashed, adults stop scolding rowdy children, the children, emboldened, become more rowdy, families move out, unattached adults move in, teenagers gather in front of the corner store, the merchant asks them to move, they refuse, fights occur, litter accumulates, people start drinking in front of the store. In time, an inebriate slumps on the sidewalk and is allowed to sleep it off. Pedestrians are approached by panhandlers. What the fuck sort of goddamn fan fiction is this insane person writing? Yeah, you know what? He is the Karen, okay? He was the first ever Karen. First ever Karen the world's ever known. Sounds like a city to me. Yeah, it's literally just a city. It's literally just a city. Well, yeah, Karen. We found it, boys. And so this was his theory, okay? That we need to punish the smallest crimes possible as hard as possible to make sure that other crimes, that children will not become rowdy. The link between order maintenance and crime prevention is what he's talking about, basically. So he's saying that police's job should be to maintain order, not to prevent crime. The police's job should be to maintain order. And so anything that disrupts the order of a community as hard, if not more harsh than a crime itself, or what would we expect for like a crime itself, like burglary, like robbery, like murder, stuff like that. Really nice. Law and order. This wish to decriminalize and disreputable behavior that harms no one and thus removes the ultimate sanctions of the police can employ to maintain neighborhood order is, we think, a mistake. So basically what he's saying here is that decriminalizing small infractions that harms no one. So decriminalizing actions that people do in communities that do not cause harm to people is bad. They want peacekeepers. Yes, they want peacekeepers more than anything else. Of course, agencies other than police could attend to problems posed by drunks or the mentally ill. But in most communities, especially where deinstitutionalization movement has been strong, they do not. So what he's saying here, again, is that sure, we could have people like non-government organizations and we could have people like try to help these people instead of just throwing them in jail, but they're not right now, so throw them in jail. Big brain. It's huge. His brain is huge, dude. Oh my goodness. Instead of trying to make them do this, they just give up and just throw everyone in jail. Throw the drunk people and the mentally ill in jail. Nice one, dude. And don't his positions sound familiar for how we treat criminal justice at the moment? Don't they sound familiar? The reason why these ideas are so prevalent are because of him. Communities being torn apart is because of him. Mental illness being criminalized in and of itself a lot of the times, and like people in people's mind correlated with criminality, is because of him and people like him in the conservative movement in like the 1980s. This is what he did. They joined too quickly for campaigns to decriminalize harmless behaviors, though public drunkenness, street prostitution, and pornographic displays can destroy a community more quickly than any team of professional burglars. Prostitution, porn, and drunk people destroy a community faster and better than burglars. A team of burglars. Doubt. That's a huge doubt for me personally. This is the guy who we're supposed to trust on criminal justice. And the rest of us ought to recognize the importance of maintenance and act communities without broken windows. This is where broken windows came from. Yeah, Payday 2 gang. That's true. A Payday 2 gang can't hold a candle to porn and alcohol. Gonna jerk off to destroy my community. Stop! No! You're destroying the community, bro. Stop!
Incredibly depressing to a lot of you, because it would be really nice if we had some silver bullet that could rehabilitate criminals, could turn thugs, gang members, all these people into productive members of society. But all the data shows that rehabilitation programs simply do not work. People recidivate when they leave prisons, and this...
He's quoting our good boy. I believe, is it this? Efficacy of prison rehabilitation. Here, I want to see. So he's quoting Wilson again. This root causes. This is Wilson saying that root causes don't matter, and this is he's quoting Wilson again. You know, the esteemed person who helped save America, saying that rehabilitation doesn't work. Reach similar downbeat and Conclusion, arguing that penal welfarism is doing little to curb reoffending and crime numbers kept rising. Yeah, and it's wild how, to talk about this, he pulls up something from 1974. 1974, what, 50 years ago? That's the most relevant data that you can skim here for this video. 1974? Wild how that works, right? Let's go on a little bit.
Argument has been used by the left consistently to make the case that the prisons don't work in their job of rehabilitation, which, by the way, is true, but the thing is, prisons aren't actually intended for rehabilitation, or at least that's not their primary purpose. That's actually their third purpose. Their secondary purpose is actually a deterrence purpose. The reason we give people harsh sentences, the reason we punish people after they commit crimes, in part, is for punishment against that person, but it's also to deter other people from following in their footsteps. Now, the data on prisons' effect as a deterrent is a little bit mixed. I've seen some arguments that certain policies and certain crimes, depending on how swiftly they are prosecuted, depending on how swiftly the justice is felt by the person who committed it, are effective as deterrents. But for the most part, as we talked about on this channel many different times, if people don't...
So their second reason is deterrence. Deterrence is great for stopping people committing crimes again. Now, the data doesn't support that, really, but it should. Thank you, AJW. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. That's so cool. That's so interesting. This is from the Justice Department archives, reducing recidivism by strengthening federal bureaus prisons. Here's some things that they talk about. So he's like, oh, but it totally want to cut crime, just kill everyone. Honestly, if we just killed everyone, crime would just disappear. Here's this study that was done. It's really interesting. Do harsher prison conditions reduce recidivism? Isn't this interesting? So not only conditions, but also like this talked about how long they went to prison for. We estimate the causal effect of prison conditions on recidivism rate by exploiting a discontinuity in the assignment of federal prisons to security levels. Inmates housed in higher security levels are no less likely to recidivate than those housed in minimum security. If anything, our estimates suggest that harsher prison conditions lead to more post-release crime. Though small sample sizes limit the precision of our estimates, we argue that our findings may have important implications for prison policy, and our methodology is likely to be more applicable beyond this particular context we study. Wow, that's so interesting. You're telling me that this doesn't really work? That you're not like actually stopping people from committing more crime? Wow, by just being meaner to them? Damn, who could have seen this coming, man?
Seen some arguments that certain policies and certain crimes, depending on how swiftly they are prosecuted, depending on how swiftly the justice is felt by the person who committed it, are effective as deterrents. But for the most part,
we were talking about deterrence. Oh yeah, deterrents don't work. They say the same thing when it comes to the death penalty, that the death penalty being like something you can get because of your crime. Like states that have lowered the requirement for like the death penalty, depending on the crime that you get, they have not seen a deterring factor in those crimes. It literally just does not work.
As we talked about on this channel many different times, if people don't think that they're going to get caught, then the deterrence element isn't going to be that effective. At least the criminal justice punitive deterrence element isn't going to be that effective. But again,
does everybody think that they're not going to get caught for like a crime? Do you think? I mean, I would hazard to guess, right, and this is just me, but I would hazard to guess that if you commit a crime and you don't want to be caught by the police, you do what you can to not be caught, and you think that you won't be caught. And some people who do think they will be caught, like, or there's a potential that they could, like, they're still going to do the crime. They're just going to try and be sneakier about it. They think that they won't get caught. Yeah, sure. Like everybody who commits a crime, they don't want to be caught. They think they won't get caught. Okay.
Just as rehabilitation is a third string, hopefully we can benefit in this way from our prison system, but not actually the goal. Deterrence is actually a secondary function of the criminal justice system. It is very important. We do want to prevent future crimes.
I thought you said tertiary. Did we just throw away deterrence here? I thought he said like putting the people in jail is the first aspect of jail. Deterrence is the second part, and then rehabilitation should be the third part. Yeah, rehabilitation is in third place, but then
but not actually the goal. Deterrence is actually a secondary function of the criminal justice system. It is very important. We do want to prevent future crimes from occurring, but the primary purpose of prisons, and you can look this up in any single criminal justice textbook if you haven't heard, is incapacitation.
Incapacitation. No, I'm incapacitated. No, anything but the incapacitation. I'm getting fucked right now. Listen, sure, the first thing that you want to do with jail is to put them in jail. Yeah. So now we know that deterrence doesn't work. Like many studies have been shown that deterrence doesn't work and they are now off the street. Now what do? What we do is we help them. Don't you think that'd be good? They're going to be in jail for a while. Why don't you like give them good things to do? You know? Don't you think that giving them good things to do would be pretty sick?
The idea that we're removing people from society so that they no longer offend in society. And by its very nature, putting somebody in prison, locking them up in a cage, does actually prevent them from committing crimes in society. Now, I know some of you out there on the internet are going to be writing in the comments, but what about gang leaders?
While you're in prison, you can't commit crimes on the street because you're in prison. But like a lot of those people are going to be let out of prison. Don't you think? Gay leaders, yeah, gay leaders are able to do way too much from their prison cell. I had a middle shop teacher in high school answer my question about the death penalty by saying that you put people in cells, you take them out, kill them, and keep doing that. It stops the crime. Realizing very young, oh shit, that's bullshit. Yeah, it is. But people, once again, people are taught to believe that if you just punish people more for doing things, that they'll just do it less. It doesn't really work out that way.
That still run their criminal operation from within prison. But what about people who are committing mail fraud from in prison? But what about there are certain things that you can do that affect the outside world while you're in prison? Extortion, all those things are the case. But for the most part, if you are on Main Street outside of a prison, you're not going to be murdered by somebody if that would-be murderer is in fact in prison. And there is a very powerful element to this idea because
okay, yeah, I mean, is anybody argue? Well, I'm not personally an anarchist, but is anybody else arguing for like having no prison? Like we're not talking about whether or not we should have prison. We're talking about like what we should do when people go to prison.
This meme is very real.
And with some crimes, whether or not they should go to prison, which I think we need to less crimes where people go to prison.
This meme is very real.
One of the things that the left doesn't like to talk about, because in the periods of time where they say, oh, well, racism is the cause of crime, we passed the Civil Rights Act, and in the 50s when we had Jim Crow, crime was going down, yet after the Civil Rights Act, crime was going up, and welfare spending was going up, and poverty was going down, is the fact that the root cause related to incarceration actually strongly correlates with crime. You see,
one more time,
related to incarceration actually strongly correlates with welfare spending was going up and poverty was going down, is the fact that the root cause related to incarceration actually strongly correlates with crime. You see, between
1350, it's just a tiny bit. Listen, they were doing all of this crime. What? The Civil Rights Act passed, and now they do all of this crime. There has to be something else that's wrong. So this is a really interesting period, okay? Really interesting period. Poverty fell continuously from 1967 through 1980s. He's quoting also another interesting person. Where is this guy? Robert Marderson. He's quoting, and he will be quoting in the future, Robert Marderson. He was a sociologist who wrote the 1974 study, What Works Concerning the Shortcomings of Prison Rehabilitation Programs. It was highly influential with creating what became known as the nothing works doctrine. So what the nothing works doctrine basically says is that nothing works to help like prisoners not be criminals. They'll just always be criminals. So we need to just like just keep them like animals, because this person will never not commit crime. And this correlated really strongly with a big conservative movement in the late 1970s and through the 1980s, especially with like the Reagan administration, where and then you hit on the welfare queens and all of this type of stuff. So yeah, you should credit this man for also trying for destroying the country as well. He's another person that helped make the prison system as bad as it is today. He did basically everything that he could. And a lot of people like AJW like to take his like early work for what he said. His later work was more optimistic, but they don't talk about that. They don't talk about his work from later. They just like to talk about his work from earlier. That's the work that really matters. It's just kind of untrue that like poverty was just dropping all of the time during this period. Did we forget about the 1973 recession? Gas prices quadrupled because like the United Arab Emirates and other like Arab countries stopped giving oil to the US. We had stagnation and inflation at the same time. Like this is a really big period. This recession was pretty huge. Millions of people slipped into poverty because of this, but I guess like we're just going to pretend that it didn't happen. But I guess. Right? Something along those lines, right? The income gap grew in the 1980s, study finds. Economics and separation between the richest and poorest families increased in 43 states. Wow. Isn't that something? Wow. Who could have seen that coming? California's growth of $13,000, the average family income of its richest 20%, ranked fourth in the nation, the report said. Virginia was highest with $21,000. The poorest fifth of families grew poorer during the 1980s in 32 states, including California, the study showed. Similarly, in California and 23 other states, families in the middle fifth had lower average incomes by the end of the decade than they did in the 1970s, than they did in 1979. The share of all income held by the middle fifth of Californian families declined slightly from 17% to 16% when it ended. Wow. So people were just slip sliding into poverty. But don't worry. Listen, everything was actually okay. You know, everything, like, just poverty just like basically disappeared, bro. Nothing happened, bro. Income inequality wasn't a real issue, bro. Oh wait, what's this? Income inequality has been on the rise since the 1980s. What? Who could have seen this coming? Income inequality in the U.S. continues to rise according to the report from the Congressional Budget Office. Ooh, the CBO. Really? The report, which presents data from 2018, finds that the average income before taxes and transfers among households was in the lowest fifth of the income distribution was $22,000, while income for households in the highest fifth was $300,000. $22,000. $22,000. And it could be even and less than that if you're even more poor. $22,000 a year. That's not a lot of money to work with in an entire year. It's really not. Also, just so you know, just so you understand, this point in time in history is when, you know how like the Rust Belt now is just like a ghost and shell of manufacturing. You guys know that, right? Like Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, how they have like so many like manufacturing buildings that were around that just got obliterated. That happened during the 1970s and 80s. Like that main push was during the 1970s and 80s. That's when that stuff was happening. So once again, places like Chicago and Detroit, which are really big manufacturing cities in the country, kind of disappeared. Also, we helped Korea and Japan after the Korean in the World War II. And guess what? They started making cars and they started shipping those cars over to the US, making it even harder to do manufacturing. And ever since, remember that the oil prices went up. So people wanted smaller cars that were more efficient on oil. Nissans and Toyotas started to roll around and we started to see less of Ford. You know, that just happened as well. We started to ship cars over and people wanted to use them because our cars were big and clunky and just sucked up fucking oil. I mean, they were fast. They'd pass everything but a gas station. But at that point in time in history, that's not what people wanted. Interesting how that works, huh? Interesting how all that worked. Interesting how these families, these poor families got poorer and remained poor, even though he tries to say that everything was getting better. It just wasn't true.
In 1967 and 1980, the prison population in the United States of America went down, despite the fact that crime in the United States of America was up fivefold. So people were committing more crime in the United States of America, yet we were locking up less and less people. On top of that, the sentences were significantly shorter. During that same time period that I was just talking about, the time you would spend in prison if you murdered somebody, arguably one of the worst crimes you could possibly commit, was just 5 years. 5 years in prison. Nobody is going to be deterred if they really want to kill somebody if it only cost them 5 years of their life. It's
like, once again, he's talking about the deterrence thing. Deterrence isn't what stops people from committing crime and doesn't stop them from committing crime again. I didn't look into exactly if the prison sentences were shorter back then. There are more important things that I wanted to look at. Deterrence didn't help. Just 5 years. 5 years is a long ass time. 5 years is a pretty long ass time.
Very real.
Okay.
absolutely absurd that this was the prevailing knowledge. This was what was being put forward by the advocates of penal welfarism, those that we're seeing echoes of today in the progressive movement. But yeah, 5 years was the sentence for murder. 3.4 years, the sentence for rape. Again, these are not strong deterrents. And for property crimes, forget about it. You weren't being sent to prison for the most part for property crimes. We didn't have strong incentives for bail, and we overall sympathized and blamed everybody else but the criminal, and we didn't think about incapacitating these individuals.
Source? He doesn't have any. He just likes to say this. So basically, he just said deterrence works. Not really, the study says. Not really, like they've said. But I'm gonna keep saying that it works, and we need to throw more people in jail because I think it works. So I want to see one thing. So let's talk about crimes, okay? And like violent crimes even specifically. These people that he quoted, people like James Wilson and people like Robert Martinson. Both of these people were pretty influential for the prison systems that we had, especially moving into like more conservative administrations like Reagan's and Nixon's when it came to crime, especially Reagan with his like tough on crime, welfare queen type memes. That's when that started to ramp up. And that's when like a lot of mass incarceration started. But you would think that when that happens, because this is when we started to add like more mass incarceration and be tougher on crime. And this is when we started to put through broken windows policing. If you thought that any of this worked, don't you think that we would see crime rates going down? Don't you think we'd see crime rates going down? When Robert Madison posted his study, okay, in 1974, what worked, basically saying that nothing will ever stop a criminal from being a criminal, so we just need to put them in jail forever, and they're basically animals that we need to keep away from the general populace. Let's just take a look at this. These are crimes in the United States from 1960 to 2019. Just number of crimes. I highlighted a couple of things here. So these are the years, the population of America, and total crimes. And you can look at violent crimes or total crimes, whichever one you want, doesn't really matter. Both of them go up. So that's when he dropped that, and that's when Wilson Wilson's ideas started to proliferate a lot of communities, and you would imagine that the crimes would go down, right? 10 million, 11 million. Another 11 million. It went down a little bit here, but then it skyrocketed back up to 11.2 million, 12.2 million, 13.4 million, 13.4 million, but higher this time, 12.9 million, 12.1, 13 again, another 14 in here. Man, don't you think that these would like go down? All these like policies with a lot of these people's ideas becoming more prolific in the criminal justice system? Huh. Weird how that worked.
Then the 1980s roll along, and we have a couple of decades of mass incarceration. We start locking people up, increasing the population. This is supposedly the bad times in the United States of America, but in just 15 years, we see the crime rate break. The fever in this nation starts to go.
But just 15 years? As you see, we started mass incarceration nearing 2 decades later. Crime has gone down. 2 decades. Almost 2 decades. 15 years. Don't you think in that amount of time something else could have like led to the drop in crime? We did it, Reddit. We've upended almost every community in this country. We've done it. Yeah, everyone wasn't getting lead poisoning. Lead poisoning was pretty bad. It was pretty cringe.
Go away, and we start to function and start to see a renaissance in this country that we were not expecting. I mean, seriously, look at the crime rates in this nation when we started locking the criminals up that were actually committing the crime. Look at them plummet, and look at the spikes we're seeing as we've taken our foot off the gas pedal. Now, I know
this is one of my favorite parts of the video, personally. Honestly, one of my favorite parts in the video. Red line are homicide, specifically, not even just crimes. Red line is homicide. Blue line is incarceration. So we can, so let's look at this, okay? For 1 second. My favorite part of the video.
Look at the spikes we're seeing as we've taken our foot off the gas pedal. Now, I know correlation doesn't equal causation, but the numbers don't lie. It's obvious that when we got serious about criminal justice related policy, crime went down because we were removing.
Okay, so once again, I'm not gonna say correlation equals causation, but as you can see, look at the correlation. It's obviously causation. Big fucking brain. Huge brain. That's how he interprets that. That's unironically how he interprets this graph. As you can see, we threw everyone in jail, and then crime went down sometime later. Even though mass incarceration started here, but don't you think like wasn't throwing the criminals in jail supposed to like take down the crime? Why did it take so long for the crime to drop? What happened to this drop? Before here, we started like here is when incarceration really started to pick up. It took 10 years to even start to cross. 10 years? Really? Incarceration skyrocketing? Shouldn't it have gone down at the same rate? Because you're locking up the criminals who do crime, right?
People who were prone to commit crimes, repeat offenders from our society. Now, like I said, poverty was going down during this whole period of time that these people who say you need to arrest poverty because poverty is a...
Poverty was not going down. This in the 1980s is when a lot of like wealth inequality started to spike. That's when it started to get like as bad as possible. And that's where the wealth inequality that we see today really started, was in the 1980s. So yeah, a lot of people were slipping into poverty. The country was being like upheavaled by a lot of jobs being shifted overseas and the economy shifting from manufacturing to like service and all stuff like that. It's just people just getting richer. It was not happening. There were people getting richer. There were a lot of people getting poorer as well. To me, that looks like too many people in jail. Don't worry. He doesn't think that there can be too many people in jail. He does not believe that. We should be throwing everyone in jail, actually, basically. And he also said rehabilitation doesn't work. I just want to make sure I tackle this before we move on to the crazy, insane shit that throwing more people in jail is what led to crime reducing. So here's this, the practice profile written in the National Institute of Justice, which is rehabilitation. This practice includes programs that are designed to reduce recidivism among adult offenders by improving their behavior, skills, mental health, and social functioning. Wow! You're telling me if someone improves their social functioning, their mental health, their skills, and their behavior, they commit less crime? What? I'm shocked. And access to education and employment. Offenders may become participants in rehabilitation programs during multiple points in their involvement with the criminal justice system. This practice is rated promising for reducing recidivism among adult offenders.
This meme is very real.
So true, Marjorie. My goodness. Wow. How did that work? And today, talking about prison reform. And the United States Department of Justice archives, reducing recidivism by strengthening federal bureau prisons. Recent ongoing reforms to reduce recidivism blows a summary of the most significant recent ongoing reforms to the starting from inmate arrival at the bureau facility and continuing until his or her return home. And this is how they handle it. Okay, from day one, identifying the inmate's individual crime-genetic needs. Find out what they need. What led them to commit crime in the first place. How do we fix that? Find out what they need. Building a school district within the federal prison system. Research shows that inmates who practice in correctional education programs have a 43% lower odds of returning to prison than those who do not. Wow. Every dollar spent in prison education saves $4 on the cost of reincarceration. Who could have seen this coming? Launching a tablet-based pilot program for prison education, supporting a second chance program, Pell pilot program, encouraging inmates to develop marketable job skills, is expanding opportunities for occupational training with a focus on ensuring that inmates develop job skills they need to find work after release from custody. Research shows that inmates who worked in prison industries were 24% less likely to recidivate, 14% more likely to be gainfully employed than those who don't. Develop standardized evidence-based programs to reduce recidivism. You know what is not in this evidence-based program to reduce recidivism? Mass incarceration. Evidence-based? Yeah, I know AJW is allergic to evidence, but it is actually pretty good. I think it's actually pretty sick sometimes. Helping inmates maintain family ties while incarcerated, prioritizing mental health treatment for inmates, ensuring inmates receive appropriate substance abuse training. Improving people's lives improves their life? The thing is, this is genuinely shocking to people like AJW who like live their life thinking that if we just make people suffer more, the country will just be better. This is genuinely shocking to someone like him. It was so shocking, in fact, that he decided not to look into any of it.
Allegedly the root cause while crime was spiking. So that is not the thing that is generating the criminality. Now, income inequality was going up from the 1960s through the 1980s and into the...
Didn't he say earlier that that poverty wasn't being a real problem? Now he's saying that people were sliding into poverty? What? That's weird. How did that work? I want to make sure that I here's this on black people, okay? Because he also wanted to bring up black people and be like, listen, we passed the Civil Rights Act. Like, they're basically not being racism anymore. They're pogging, but they still commit crime. While the American understanding of the concept of race has changed over time, the history of African Americans provides a useful template for understanding the history of race relations. The black experience has affected how racial minorities have been treated over history. And this goes into talk about a couple other things. I want to make sure that I grab this part. Here's this part. Millions of African Americans remained trapped in poverty. By the 1990s, the historic gap between whites and blacks in education, income, and access skill had narrowed considerably, but the wealth of white households remained quadruple of black people. Unemployment was far lower, and nearly a quarter of black children lived in poverty. 25% of black children lived in poverty? A quarter lived in poverty. But listen, they were doing so well.
1990s, but crime stopped or reduced significantly. The increase reduced in the 1990s, and income inequality was going up. So the idea of this growing income inequality tracking with crime is just not the case. However, incarcerating people changes an attitude in the criminal justice system does appear to track. And by the way, the third cause...
It doesn't. Crime stopped. It stopped. We did it. We threw everyone in jail. Crime has been stopped, boys. We did it, Reddit. We did it, Reddit. Here. I have this up as well, which is like super interesting. What caused the crime decline? Because this is like really interesting, right? Because people like him like to say that the decline in crime had to do, what he thinks obviously, with throwing more people in jail. This report examines one of the nation's least understood recent phenomena, a dramatic decline in crime nationwide over the past 2 decades. We analyze various theories for why this occurred. By reviewing more than 40 years of data from all 50 states and the 50 largest cities, it concluded that over harsh criminal justice policies, particularly increased incarceration, which rose even more dramatically over the same period, were not the main drivers of the crime decline. AJW's wrong again? He's just fucking lying again. Who could have seen this coming? I honestly wasn't expecting him to just lie again. I'm so surprised. He couldn't do this. Not my AJW. No, he wouldn't lie. He would never do that. He would never do that. No. Who could have seen? No, there has to be something wrong here. We have to keep reading. In fact, the report finds that increased incarceration has been declining in its effectiveness as crime control tactics for more than 30 years. Its effect on crime rates since the 1990s has been limited, and it has been non-existent since 2000. More important were the various social, economic, and environmental factors such as the growth in the economy and the aging population. Actual insanity that he would just lie. My goodness, just straight up lying, just absolutely lying. And this one also went into correlation doesn't equal causation, as he said himself, and then he went on to try to say that it was causative. That's a lie. Thank you, AJW. I appreciate you.
Racism. Again, are we going to argue that the effects of Jim Crow are somehow stronger after Jim Crow was instituted, when it was removed from the laws, all that evil racism, than it was when it was actually happening? It doesn't make any sense. Every single factor that they claim does not correlate with an increase in crime or decrease in crime. However, decreases
To answer this question, yes. After the 1964 Civil Rights Act, there was someone who ran during Reagan's election. Reagan did the Southern strategy, which was to help get more Southern Americans on board with the Republican Party. And he was not explicitly, but he was against things like busing. He was against not non-segregationist policies. He was against affirmative action. He was against increasing civil rights for Black people. And he got, I think it was like 42% of the vote. And another person ran explicitly on segregation. His whole thing was like, I think we should be more racist. And so he got 13% of the vote. So the country voted 56% in favor of either implicitly or explicitly, George Wallace, I believe so, either implicitly or explicitly against civil rights. But, you know, listen, it was like basic, it just wasn't even a problem anymore, broski.
And crime correlate with policies like mass incarceration, which again are intended for incapacitation, not rehabilitation. But it actually goes further than that, because again, a lot of times I try my very best during debates and conversations with people on the left to not accept their false premises. And the reason I don't want to accept their false premises is because I don't want you guys to see me agreeing to bad information in order to forward their narrative. Because even if I disagree with them, if you think I accept their initial premises, you just think that we diagnose the problem successfully together, but we disagree on the solutions. And then it could kind of go either way. But if you accept the premise that prisons aren't very good at rehabilitating people and our recidivism rates are really high, then the answer to that problem is not to let people out of prison earlier.
It's to make prisons worse. As you can see, you do not understand. If you think our prisons are bad, the obvious solution is not to try to make them better. The obvious solution must be we have to make them worse. Just keep it going. Every crime is the death penalty. That'll stop crime. Every crime gets the death penalty. Jaywalking, death penalty. Littering, death penalty. Driving without a license, death penalty. I honestly think that we could fix crime in a couple months even.
And more frequently. The answer to that problem, again, logically, is to hold people in prisons longer, because the chances of them reoffending are far greater once they're already in prison. And if you don't put them in prison, if you just let them keep getting arrested over and over and over again for the crimes that they're committing, that doesn't work either. So even if you accept their basic premise, which a lot of people make the mistake of doing, you should still argue that they're completely wrong, because if you can't rehabilitate somebody in a prison, why would you let that person out on the street to offend against other people?
We're not rehabilitating them though. Like what we read from the Justice Department was them saying that this worked, but not that it's being implemented everywhere. It's not being implemented everywhere. It's just not. Bring back the gallows. Honestly, guillotine. That's what he wants. That's not what we're doing. It would be good to do it, but that's just not what we're doing. There's a reason why other countries, and he'll bring up other countries, are doing better with recidivism. It's not because our criminals are just giga evil. It's because they handle crime better than we do.
Doesn't make any sense. Now, I know somebody watching this video is going to be thinking, or maybe even commenting, or eventually I'll get a video response from somebody dumb enough to challenge me on these points, that something Norway doesn't treat their prisoners harsh, they have reduced sentences, and they have a lower recidivism rate than the United States of America. And this is true. Not just Norway, but Scandinavia as a whole has a lower recidivism.
Listen,
This meme is very real.
That's me. He's talking about me. That's me. Something Norway, something they don't torture their prisoners, something cringe.
Recidivism rate than the United States. That's just a fact. But here's the thing. The reason the United States has more prisoners than any other nation on the planet is because we have higher rates of violent crime. And we've always had higher rates of violent crime than Scandinavian countries. So you're talking about a far less violent population going into prison, and then talking about the results of them and the criminal justice system being lacked due to the fact that crime was never as serious a problem over there as—
Yeah, for the reasons for why there wasn't as much crime, less violent, the population is just way less violent. They just don't be doing crime. I wonder why they don't be doing crime. Once again, AJW believes that the reason why people do crimes is just because they're like mentally ill or they think it's fun. So that's why he thinks, or they're like naturally violent. And we just have so many naturally violent people in this country, because it definitely wasn't poverty that led people to commit crime, because he completely rejects that. He will not never believe that when poor people are poor, they are more likely to do crime, and a lot of those crimes are stealing.
As it was over here. Also, people from Scandinavia, people from Norway, when they come to the United States, they don't commit crimes. There's something about Scandinavian culture, attitudes, and practices that doesn't cause them to start shooting people up in the streets, and that doesn't change when they come to the United States of America. However, criminal-prone populations, when they've gone into Scandinavian countries, are not respecting their laws. They're way outpacing their native counterpart in criminality, and it's not even close. And we'll see if they keep recidivism.
Oh my God. We're just gonna post that?
Is very real.
Listen, their culture, they have the non-culture crime. They have the non-kill crime. But us, we have the giga kill crime. What's he even talking about, man? Well, what's he talking about? He's dancing around. Listen, and on 2022 YouTube, year of our Lord, you can't say the same things that you used to be able to in 2016. You just can't. They have the non-murder gene. This has been proven. He has studied their skull shape. They just do be committing crime because it's funny. The reason why people commit crimes when they go to different countries can be for a plethora of reasons. People try and boil it down to, well, they just don't. Well, why? A lot of people, if you have the money to travel all the way across like the world, if you have the money to travel all the way across the world to go to like a Scandinavian country, if you're going to like, if you're somewhere in the US and you're traveling to like fucking Finland to like live, you probably have some money on you. Can I get a show of hands? How many of you guys can like move to Finland or Norway? You think sometime, not even right now, sometime soon, let's say the next 5 years, you think you'd have enough money to be able to move to Finland, move to Norway? You think you can do that? No, I wish. Man, I'm from the Netherlands. Get well soon. I'll keep you in my prayers, okay? I live in Norway. Oh my gosh, we have so many people who need help. Thank you for saying plethora. It means a lot. No problem. Yeah, I wish. No shot, dude. It's almost like you gotta be pretty wealthy to move all the way across the country, all the way across the world. Wild how that shit happens, right? And you're telling me more rich people are less likely to commit crime? Wow, I wonder how that happened. Again, if he's referring to like Muslims from like the Middle East who moved to a lot of like countries in Europe, they really don't commit like that much crime. And a lot of the crime that they that these people try to say that they do is either made up or way less severe than what actually happened. A lot, yeah, like the no-go zones, the rape gang, like the Muslims come into the country and they run in the street. They're flocking like crows, like the black crows they are, and they come down to slap white women with their pee-pee. It's terrible. Truly awful. I fear for Europeans. Oh my god. So they like pull a lot of shit like that. It's just untrue. It's just untrue. With the PP. A murder of crows, if you will. True. All they do is murder. They're predisposed to it. It's just what they do. AJW knows what's correct. Don't check their porn searches though. Ask this dork about Anders Breivik for shooting up people. Is that the guy in like Norway who was like, there's too many browns in my country, I think I'm gonna go kill some white people now? Was that guy who like set off like a bomb in like Sweden or Norway, and then he like went to go shoot some like white kid because he was mad that there were brown people in the country? What? Yeah, a lot of the, I think most of the people he killed were white. He went to like this little island where like there was a school trip or something, and he disguised himself as like a cop, and then he just went to go shoot all of the kids, and most of them were white. He set off a bomb in a mostly white area. He's like, boy, I'm so mad. I'm so mad that brown people are in the country. It's time to go kill some white people. Like wacky stuff. Hey, listen, you say whatever you want about these immigrants. They're not typically pulling stuff like that. Yeah, but they were Marxists. They liked critical race theory.
Debating after they go into these soft prisons, if the Norwegian or Scandinavian penal system will actually change to meet the challenges of a different population that doesn't follow into the traditions and norms of Scandinavian culture. There's this weird idea, and it's a secondary myth that kind of underpins the other myths related to the criminal justice system, that the United States is just far more evil, far more cruel, far more racist, far more intolerant to the poor, and thus they built this evil criminal justice system.
True. No, my man spitting.
Criminal justice system, that the United States is just far more evil, far more cruel, far more racist, far more intolerant to the poor, and thus they built this evil criminal justice system, and that led to the mass incarceration, and there was no justification for it. We tried.
True. Bars. Yeah, my man's this is my favorite song. He's dropping bars. Yes, our criminal justice system began with catching slaves who didn't want to be slaves, and then we turned our prisons into punishing former slaves because they couldn't be typical slaves anymore. So we'll just make them different type of slaves, and then we'll just put them in prison. And then we continue that. The racism all through that. We continued with this person's ideology and the ideology of Wilson and Martinson, who just think that more and more punishment, more and more crime, more and more suffering in the country is going to lead to less crime. And guess what? It hasn't. It just hasn't. And even when we had that drop in crime, even then the mass incarceration that they wanted didn't contribute in a real way to the drop in crime. It just doesn't. He just does. His ideology just doesn't work. It's been not working for like 60, 70, 80 years now, but he keeps wanting to use it because it makes him feel good. He just likes it when people suffer.
All the things that the lefties argue for in relation to the criminal justice system, they didn't work. And in response to the fact that they didn't work and crime spiked, we tailored criminal justice interventions to the problem, to addressing it head on. It wasn't for no reason. It's because we had a serious crime problem in the United States. I know a lot of people have forgotten about it because crime has been dropping since 1995, but this recent spike should prove positive, as James Wilson argued, that when we go soft on crime, the criminals come back. When we stop caring about deterrence and incapacitation, the criminals come back and they take advantage. That's what we're seeing right now.
We're not. As you can see, guys, in the US now, it's like we don't even put criminals in jail, bro. Like people just commit crimes and then the cops are like, should I put them in jail? And the cops are like, nah, dude. Like the cops don't even, you know what? Listen, if you want to, wait a second. Are these your champions? Are these your champions for saving the country? Police officers fired for ignoring LA robbery in progress to play Pokemon Go. Are these your champions who saved the country? Curious how this works. This guy's brain is so fucking big. Yeah. So yeah, this is true. Wait, which Pokemon was it? I forget. I think it was a Pikachu. They were called to respond to a robbery, and they were like, yeah, but there's a Snorlax over there. Yeah, it was either a Clefairy or a Snorlax. Approximately in the next 20 minutes. Snorlax. Yep. They didn't want to go to a robbery for Snorlax. These are his champions. These are the people saving the country. They're doing it. Amazing police training in action. Oh my freaking gosh, dude. Yeah, dude. Spend that money that we use on police for actually making communities better and stop trying to make people suffer. This is cringe. This is just untrue that people aren't being punished for crimes anymore. It's just not. They're being punished for crimes. And honestly, a lot of people who were in like BLM protests, they got the absolute book thrown at them. This idea that these people like weren't punished at all for the things that they did is just like so wrong on so many levels. Honestly, I don't even know what to say anymore. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And it's sad that we keep lying because what I want is for the world to be better. I think that'd be sick as fuck, actually. But I want people if to not commit very many crimes. And if they do commit crimes, I want them to be able to go back into the world and not commit crimes. And what we do right now with making people just suffer, just worrying about suffering and nothing else, does not help reduce crimes. We're just making it worse. His solution to our bad prison system is make it worse. These are the types of people that we have to defeat politically. This is what I mean when I'm like, we need to take this ideology, throw it on the ground, burn it, and stomp it out, and just cauterize the wound and make sure nothing else is able to grow in its place, because it is destroying this country. It's destroying these the people of this beautiful nation. It's just terrible. Just make it worse.